both in the room and online. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this session on reducing inequalities through development cooperation, a shared commitment. We are delighted to bring together three key European development actors: the European Commission, the Agence française de Développement, AFD, the Agencia Española de Cooperación Internacional para el Desarrollo, AECID, and together we will discuss how we are turning strategic priorities into operational action to tackle one of the most pressing challenges of our time, inequality. It has been said several times over the course of the conference. The facts are stark. Today, the top 10% of the global population holds nearly 75% of global wealth, while the bottom 50% owns just 2%. And 690 million people still live in extreme poverty. And these inequalities go far beyond income. They intersect with age, with ethnicity, gender, localization, and they undermine access to public services, health, education, decent work, and ultimately they undermine social cohesion, trust in institutions, and the very foundations of the social contract. At the same time, we're facing another crisis, which is a crisis of financing. The financing gap to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is widening. It amounts to $4 trillion annually now. And SDG 10 on reducing inequalities amongst and within countries is part of the SDGs that are most off track. So these trends send us two very clear messages. First, addressing inequality is not optional, and it is not a problem of tomorrow, it is a problem of today. And second, we cannot bridge this gap alone. No institution, no government, no one can do this alone. So this really requires cooperation between a whole range of actors, public institutions, development banks, private actors, civil society organizations, academia, and that's why the European Commission has made inequality reduction a central objective of its external action. So I just said that we cannot act alone. We consider that one actor with whom it is fundamental to partner is the private sector. Why? Because in most developing economies, the private sector accounts for 90% of jobs, employment, and 60% of GDP. So it is clear that it has a great potential to reduce inequalities. Through the Global Gateway, we are working to mobilize private finance across strategic sectors. We have 5 strategic sectors, which are digital, energy, transport, health, and education. And we want to make sure that these investments create meaningful and measurable benefits for the people who are most at risk of being left behind. And that is where our so-called 360 degrees approach comes in. What does it mean? It means that we want to combine infrastructure with support to enabling environment, to paying attention to social and environmental standards, to have value-driven partnerships, and shape inclusive and sustainable markets. So this can feel a little bit abstract, so I'm just going to give you an example. The Human Development Accelerator was launched with the European Investment Bank and the Gates Foundation with a European Union contribution of 750 million euros, and it is expected to leverage 4 times that amount, with a strong focus on equitable access to health services, including polio eradication. So this is policy leadership translated into concrete interventions. But we need more than that. And we do more than that. We act through tools and standards as well, such as the inequality marker and the distributional impact assessment methodology. Very important tools that help us move from commitment to accountability, because they allow to measure how much our interventions really contribute to inclusivity. And these tools have been developed thanks to the partnership with AFD in the framework of the facility for research on inequalities. So just to give you a little statistics, the Global Gateway is already delivering on its promise of inclusivity, because we've been applying those tools, and we found out that in 2024, 62% of new DG INPA actions had significantly contributed to reducing inequalities. And we do not stop there. Since June, the inequality marker is also applied to blending operations through the under the European the EFSD Plus, so European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, and it will also be extended to guarantees. And this is a key step forward in ensuring that private finance mobilized through the Global Gateway strategy also contributes to leaving no one behind. Third element of the mix, partnerships. I just said it, we need to work with a wide number of partners. Here in this session, we will focus on our action as Team Europe, so within Europe partnership. And we will hear the voices of Team Europe partners that have a common ambition. Both AFD and AECID have adopted inequality reduction as a central pillar of their development strategies and are working to operationalize this commitment through the development of standards that are equivalent and mechanisms that are equivalent to the inequality marker. So you will hear more about these efforts today from our excellent speakers that I'm now calling to join the floor. Mathilde CORNUT, Policy Officer at DG INPA, will present the EU's framework on inequality reduction, including the Global Gateway 360 degrees approach and the inequality marker. Professor Miguel NINO-ZARAZUA from SOAS University of London will give insights on the distributional impact assessment methodology. Céline PAYET from AFD Social Link Division will present AFD's new social link roadmap and internal scoring system, and Javier JIMENEZ de Gregorio from AECID will share Spain's approach to tackling inequalities and AECID equivalent framework to the inequality marker. Then we will open the floor to questions, so really I encourage you all to participate, both from the room and online. And just before giving the floor to our panelists, to summarize the main message, addressing inequality really must be treated as a core development objective, not just a social add-on. It is a shared responsibility. It needs to be a common policy priority, and it requires common tools, shared standards, and coordinated strategies. So thank you again for joining. Mathilde, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Laure. So as Laure just outlined, inequality reduction is not a secondary objective. It's one of the defining objectives of our time. We said it yesterday. We are saying it now today. But how to address it, what we are doing, how does the European Commission contribute to reducing inequalities? And that is what we will be seeing now. So our reply is simple through the Global Gateway strategy. But first, what is Global Gateway? Global Gateway is an EU external investment strategy. It refers to the call that the G7 leaders in June 2021 gave to launch a high standard and transparent infrastructure partnership. Between 2021 and 2027, the Global Gateway aims to mobilize up 300 billion of both public and private investment in 5 priority sectors: digital, climate, transport, education, and energy. But Global Gateway is a strategy, is not a fund per se. So to mobilize that investment, we need some financial tools. And one of them that Laure mentioned during the introduction is what we call the FSD Plus. So the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which combines grants, blending, and guarantees, with a guarantee capacity of up to 40 billion euros. But what makes Global Gateway truly different is not only the scale of investment, it's also what Laure mentioned, the 360-degree approach. And I will come back to that later. But here's the real point. If there's Global Gateway investment, do not reach the most vulnerable. If there's Global Gateway investment, do not narrow the gap between the richest and the poorest. Then, indeed, it will not reduce inequalities. So that is really the challenge I would like to put on the table today. How does the Global Gateway contribute to reducing inequalities? And I will try to answer to this difficult question through a simple graph. So you have the answer on the screen, and the answer is threefold. First, Global Gateway contribute to reducing inequalities by mobilizing the private sectors in key priority areas. Second, it contributes to reducing inequalities through the 360-degree approach, so the second circle. And then, final point, it will also try to help reducing inequalities in fragile contexts by extending this logic to these settings, especially where fairness is so much at risk. So first, mobilizing the private sector. So Laure said it, we need the private sector for different reasons. First, in most of the developing countries, they already generate 90% of the jobs, 60% of GDP, and we are also facing a financing gap. So we need all in order to reply and to meet the SDGs. Now it is true that private investment does not automatically reduce inequalities. In fact, it can sometimes make them worse, and we all know it. We have all seen it. It can create informal jobs, insecure ones, without protected workers. Investment can go also to urban centers and to capital-intensive industries, bypassing the rural areas. It can also further reinforce discrimination by letting some groups, especially the most vulnerable, out of the market. I'm thinking about women, about persons with disabilities. So indeed, it's true, private investment can in some cases increase inequalities. But when the right conditions are in place, and when I'm saying right condition, I mean adequate social protection system, I mean also rule of law, governance. Yesterday we also mentioned the fairness of the fiscal system. So when those conditions are there, private sector can become a powerful equalizer. How? Because it can also create decent jobs. It can also deliver essential goods and services in health, education, digital. It can also drive innovation, or it can also create inclusive business model where the most vulnerable are the hurt. So the lesson is clear. Private investment can reduce inequality, but only if the right conditions are in place. And that is exactly why, under Global Gateway, we leverage public and also private finance in the sectors with the greatest potential to reduce inequalities. In health, to improve equal access to vaccine and medicines. In education, to create the skills for the decent work. In digital, to connect the unconnected. In transport, to give remote communities access to market and essential services. And also in energy and climate, we discussed yesterday, in order to promote the just green transition. And some of the strongest examples of this potential of Global Gateway to reduce inequalities can be seen through what we call the equality flagship. You are perhaps telling yourself, what is this concept again? So let me clarify a little bit. So equality flagship are Global Gateway label project, implementing through a Team Europe approach, so meaning the European Commission together with other actors, especially member states, and having inequality reduction as a significant of our main objective. And here is a list on the slide of the 11 equality flagships that we have in 10 countries, from digitalization in Kenya to decent work in Bangladesh. for instance. But these flagships are not the only project that we are doing. They are not just isolated cases. We also back them with resources. For instance, between 2021 and 2024, 34% of our budget, of our external action budget, went to human development, while the target that we have legally was 20%, so we are well above already. So, the first message to summarize, Global Gateway can contribute to reducing inequality, which is at the heart of the EU cooperation strategy, by mobilizing private finance and investing in key sectors. But we also all know that building a solar farm, building a cable is not enough. If the jobs created are not decent, if the small and medium enterprises are excluded, if the civil society local authorities are not a part of the process, or if the revenues are not collated and shared fairly, then structural inequalities will persist for sure. That is why, with Global Gateway, we also apply the 360-degree approach. So here, in the slide, you can see a representation of what is the 360-degree approach. So it is built on 6 key principles: democratic values and high standards, high social but also environmental standards, good governance and transparency, equal partnership, meaning also including civil society, local authorities, clean and green investment, security, human rights, rule of law, and also mobilizing all the actors, including the private sector. So in practice, what does it mean? It means that if, for example, we invest in infrastructure, we will not only look at the infrastructure created. From the design, we will consider all the environment around the infrastructure. We will invest in the skill. We will create decent jobs. We will also respect human rights and ensure that social and environmental safeguards are respected. So, it might be a little bit abstract. Laure already gave a very good example with the Human Development Accelerator. Let me give you another one to illustrate a little bit how does it work concretely on the ground. So take the Manufacturing and Access to Vaccine, Medicine and Health Technology Initiative, long name, with the short abbreviation MAF+. Perhaps you might hear about it. So MAF+ is a response that we, together with other member states, 7 European member states, had to Africa calls to support the local manufacturing agenda. So since 2021, this initiative has mobilized 2 billion to support the whole ecosystem. And this is a perfect example of a 360-degree approach. Why? Because half of this investment will go to production, manufacturing production, so creation and production of vaccine, of medicine, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And then, second, the other half of the investment will go to supporting the enabling environment, meaning research capabilities, skill development, regulatory capacity, and also institutional strengthening at both the country but also at the continental level. So that's what the first 2 messages of this presentation. Global Gateway has the potential indeed to reduce inequalities by mobilizing private finance in key sectors and also by applying the 360-degree approach. But can we really apply this approach in all the contexts? Because we also know that today nearly 1 in 4 people live in fragile contexts, with 73% in extreme poverty. So the question now is, how do we act in those fragile contexts? And the answer is, again, through Global Gateway, but not only. Global Gateway will be compatible with some fragile contexts. And indeed, we already have some Global Gateway project rolling out in more than half of the world fragile countries. When we take the definition of the OECD, 62 countries are considered as fragile, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have 41 out of the 61 countries where there is a Global Gateway project, including 10 with high or extreme fragility. But we also need to be realistic. In the context with open conflicts, with politically constrained settings, it will be very difficult to roll out the Global Gateway. It will be very difficult to mobilize the private sector in Sudan, in Chad, in Somalia, for instance. So what do we do in that case? We do not disengage, we stay, but we try to work through other means. We try to work through the civil society, local authority, and what we apply in this context is really what we call the humanitarian development peace nexus, which is a toolbox with a lot of tools, such as conflict analysis, early warning, resilience assessment, etc. And this brings me to my final point, accountability. Laure also mentioned it. So we can see that we have the ambition, we have the strategy to reduce inequality, but of course it's not enough. What matters if we deliver, if we claim that the global gateway will indeed reduce inequality, then we need to have the tools to prove it. And that is why also we have decided to develop the inequality marker. So how does it work? The inequality marker is applied only to DG INPA, so the Directorate General in charge of the external cooperation within the European Commission, and we assess all of our action and whether and to what extent inequality reduction is an objective of an intervention by scoring each action against 3 levels, 0, 1, and 2. 0 meaning inequality reduction is not targeted, 1 inequality reduction is significant objective, and 2 is a principal objective. And to know which score to give to which intervention, we have a set of 4 criteria. The first one being analysis of trends and drivers, the second objective and activities. Then we have also indicators in place to assess the progress that we made for each action. And finally, an evaluation plan with the distributional impact assessment that we recommend to use. And Miguel will tell a word in a few minutes. So when Laure was saying at the beginning that we have in 2024 62% of DG INPA new action with having targeting inequality, what we mean is that we have 62% of our action committed in 2024 having either an I1 or an I2 score. And today, in order to be sure that we will assess all the action in Global Gateway, we are also extending it to FSD+, the tool that I mentioned at the beginning. So we extended it to blending and to guarantees soon. So we see this marker as really a turning point, because it's a way very much for us to ensure that Global Gateway is delivering on its promise of inclusivity. But it's not only a Commission tool. As Laure said at the beginning also, we have all the partners that are here on the stage, AFD, AECID, who have adopted an equivalent system. And so today, I would like to encourage all of you in the room, online, who are part of member states, DFI, civil society, international organization, to have a look to these guidelines that are public, available online. You can just Google them, and also to consider adopting the inequality marker. Because the more we align around a common standard, and the greater our collective impact will be. So to conclude, answer the question I ask myself, how does the European Commission contribute to reducing inequalities? First, by mobilizing private investment in the sector that matters the most. Second, by applying a 360-degree approach. And finally, to extend this logic to fragile contexts, while, of course, keeping ourselves accountable through the inequality marker and through the distributional impact assessment. And now we'll give the floor to Miguel, who will walk us through this tool. Thank you.
Let me see. Well, first of all, thank you very much to AFD and the European Commission for organizing this event. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for coming to this session. So today I want to talk about this new tool that we developed in partnership with the European Commission, which aims to help the Commission as well as other agencies implementing development cooperation projects to assess the extent to which they are reaching those who are supposed to benefit. And one of the reasons that motivated this is that if you think about the inequality marker provides the framework to assess whether projects aligned with objectives that are potentially inequality reducing. But we need evidence that actually those objectives materialize when you implement policies. And this is a different matter. So the idea Plus tool implements or complements the inequality marker by helping agencies to, first of all, locate the target populations within the income or consumption distribution. The tool allows users, agencies, to assess ex ante whether target populations are below the bottom 40. So you can better target policies at those who really are in need of receiving support. Also, you can implement the tool interim in the middle of the process of implementing your actions, and also at the end of the project cycle, ex post, so you can actually assess whether those who benefited from the interventions are at the bottom 40 of the income distribution. And this is in line with the SDG 10 target 1 that normally indicates that if you improve, or let's say if the income growth of those who are at the bottom 40% grows at a rate higher than the average means, this either in income or in kind transfers, then should be inequality reducing. So the principle is guided by those ideas. So you can see there's an example of how the DIA Plus looks. It's implemented in a software, open access software R, which doesn't cost, so can be easily estimated with a little bit help of a statistician. So, right, so how does the tool work? So, the tool relies heavily on existing service. Can be LSM service, which is the living standards study service, labor force service from the ILO, also household income and experiential service. You know, different countries have different service that capture income or consumption expenditure data. But for example, if you think about collecting regularly survey data, which is representative of the populations, it's very expensive. So to give you an example, an LSMS or a labor force survey costs between, you know, $1.3 to $3 million. So it is very expensive to collect representative samples. So what we do, or what we have developed, is the DIA tool. The DIA Plus tool relies on some techniques, statistical techniques based on machine learning, that takes into account the information of the income or consumption distribution that we observe from household surveys. And then through these techniques, we obtain information that contributes to a very high precision of the location of individuals and households within the income and consumption distribution. So by using this information, then we can estimate the position of beneficiaries and collect surveys that target those populations with a much more reduced cost. And the reason why we use income or consumption distribution is simply because if you think about many countries in the global south, some of them collect primarily data on consumption expenditure, whereas other countries collect data on income or both. So Latin America, where I come from, usually we collect data on income and consumption, whereas in Sub-Saharan Africa, primarily it's on consumption. No? So this is motivated by the LSMS service that focus on poverty. So poverty is estimated by consumption expenditure. Therefore, it is more common to find data on consumption. So we exploit this data to estimate the DIA Plus tools. So just to give you an example, to collect a representative sample of about 2,000 to 3,000 households costs about 30 to 40,000 euros, which is just a fraction of what normally costs to collect representative samples of similar surveys. And this is because of the techniques that we have developed. No? So it helps to make efficiency savings substantially and help agencies to do distributional impact assessments more rigorously and more cost-effectively. So I just want to take you through some of these pilots that we conducted. We conducted 3 pilots to test the tool, one in Paraguay, looking at a very interesting project. It's called Bosque, Comunidad y Vida, that promote sustainable agriculture and forestry practices in some districts in Paraguay, We also included a project in Djibouti that focused on supporting women's empowerment, in particular in some areas by providing literacy and also vocational training programs, and also in Bhutan. In Bhutan, we focused on a project that supported the civil society that was focusing on empowering women and the youth. So we implemented different versions of the DIA Plus tool. So in Paraguay, we focus on income. In Djibouti, we focus on on consumption expenditure, and also we compared that with a previous tool that was available in assets. And then in Bhutan, we use income and consumption because the country collected both consumption, expenditure, and income data. So let me just take you through one example because I don't have so much time. So I will focus on Paraguay. So we use the Encuesta Permanente de Hogares Continua, which is a level 4 survey that collects a lot of information about income. So to estimate labor income, no household income, labor income, which is income from work, the level 4 survey collects 18 questions. So if you think about in Paraguay, on average, every household has 2.8 household members which are 10 years old or older. The questionnaire needs to collect about 50 questions, right, from each household. So what we did is to implement these statistical techniques that allows, through different processes, to identify which are the dominant income sources that predict the position of the household with a very high level of precision. No? So by including 5 questions, we were able to estimate with 86% of accuracy the position of households within the income distribution. If you look at the difference between the estimated and the observed distribution, which is here, you will see that the difference between those two, the observed and the estimated quintile distributions, is just about 3% difference. So this allows then to use these 5 questions to design questionnaires that then can be complemented by key questions from the projects that in this case was focusing on the questions about how this project was benefiting communities in the rainforest in Paraguay. So, and one of the benefits of the tool is that it's flexible enough to capture intersectionalities as well. So in terms of, for example, gender, in terms of differences within those communities that are targeted, also across different identities. You know, in Paraguay, for example, there are a very significant large population of indigenous communities that, because of certain reasons, may benefit differently from those who speak Spanish, for example. So if you look at the difference of the distribution of those who benefited from the program, you can see that those who speak in Guarani, were much more concentrated on the bottom 40 than those who spoke Spanish only. So that really gave us some information about that the project was targeting vulnerable populations. The same happened with gender. So we observed that a significant share of those who received the project were female-headed households that were conventionally more vulnerable than male-headed households. But also we found important difference in terms of rural and urban dimensions that also really help to understand these heterogeneous effects that the project had in those communities. So, and without going into detail, the results show that the project targeted, those vulnerable populations, and it was, in this respect, benefiting proportionally more those who were at the bottom 40 of the income distribution, and also looking at different subgroups of the population, we could understand who were benefiting more than others. And so just to conclude, I think taking into account what we find in Paraguay, as well as in Djibouti and Bhutan, we can say that the tool, we conducted several tests. I invite you to read the report that is going to be published, I guess, soon. So in the study, we provide the statistical techniques and also all the tests that we conducted to check that the tool is a reliable method for complementing the inequality marker. No? So without implementing or conducting distributional impact assessments, agencies won't be able to actually say whether the actions are having a distributional effect. And the most important thing is that the tool allows to do this in a very cost-effective manner. No? We are not thinking about millions of euros, but we are thinking about, a much more reduced cost, which is very important because there are a lot of projects that are conducted on a regular basis, and sometimes you need data very often. No? So liable for service or LSMS for service are very important, but they are collected every 2 years, and they are very important sources for actually estimating those distributions. But our tools and the methodologies that we have developed allows to do this in a much more cost-effective manner. No? So, well, I will leave it there, and I will invite my colleague Céline PAYET to talk about AFD's projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. So over the next 15 minutes, I will present AFD strategy and approaches on multidimensional inequalities and inclusion. But let me maybe start by saying that the work on AFD work on reducing inequalities is not recent. We work on inequalities with the research facilities since 2017, and we have since then gradually put emphasis on inequalities and inclusion within our strategy. We now have a new strategy for the AFD group for 2025 to 2030, which put reducing inequalities and promoting inclusion at the very heart of our mission. This new strategy recalls that without tackling inequalities, there is no lasting economic growth, there is no efficient climate action, no peace, no reduction of poverty. Those are the things that we discussed already yesterday during this conference. So to make this ambition concrete, we launched a new social link roadmap, which has one main purpose: to promote fairer and more inclusive societies, and it do so through two main objectives. The first one is reducing multidimensional inequalities and promoting inclusion, and the second main objective is to promote gender equality. And with this social link roadmap, our ambition is to give social objectives the same weight as environmental and climate ones. As regard to the first objective, we act through three main actions areas. The first one is the financing of inclusive and redistributive public policies, such as universal social protection, education for all, fair fiscal policies, as we also discussed. The second is precisely the just environmental transition, so the transition that have and promote a strong social dimension. And the third action area is to really mainstream inequality and inclusion across all AFD sectors. We also give special attention to vulnerable territories, those that are most affected by conflict, by climate change as well, and by social and economic instability, because we know that inequalities and instability feed in each other in a very vicious cycle. And for the first time, AFD set up a target on its portfolio. So we aim to reach 50% of our commitment that will contribute to reducing inequalities and promoting inclusion by 2026. In 2024, we were already at 49% of our projects. So we aim to stay in the course. So what is our methodology? I think our Directorate General mentioned this tool at the introduction of the ceremony. So our methodology relies on the Sustainable Development Analysis tool that has been developed by AFD back in 2014 and which have evolved since then to align with our methodologies. It's basically an analysis and a scoring system that will assess the level of the contribution of the project to sustainable development and to specifically 7 dimensions of sustainable development that you can see here on the screen. So there is one dimension related to biodiversity, 2 on climate, mitigation and resilience. There is 1 dedicated dimension on inequalities and inclusion, 1 on gender, 1 on economy and governance. So it's really a tool that also helps us to create nexuses between the different dimensions of sustainable development. It is used during project identification and preparation to assess what are the intended impacts of the project and how project can really improve its contribution to specific dimensions. And specifically on the inequality and reduction dimension, so we assess the level of contribution of the project to the following areas that you can see here on the screen. So the prevention of conflict and promotion of social cohesion, access to essential goods and services, also opportunities for decent job, income creation, redistributive and universal social protection policies, and participation to political and social life and promotion of human rights. So how does it work? So in this slide, you can see the scoring scale that will reflect the level of contribution of a project to reducing multidimensional inequalities, promoting inclusion, and strengthening social cohesion. So the scale ranges from -2 to +3. Of course, we aim to maximize impact, so to reach +2 and +3 scoring. +3 are equivalent to the EU marker level 2, which are the projects that have a main purpose, a main objective to reduce inequalities and to promote inclusion. And without this purpose, the project will basically not happen. And +2 are the projects that have a specific objective on inequalities and inclusion, but it's not really the main purpose of the project. And so in line with also the do no harm principle, we aim to avoid projects that will exacerbate inequalities and worsen exclusion, which are reflected here by the negative scoring. So this methodology is aligned with the scoring system of the EUI marker, which is very useful because so we speak the same language, we have the same definition and the same methodology. We also have a new result and impact framework for the AFD group with 1 indicator dedicated to assess and measure the number of disadvantaged beneficiaries that we support through our projects. On this slide, you can see the key requirements and elements to be taken into account during project preparation to reach +2 and +3 projects. I will not go into the details, but it's pretty much aligned with what also Mathilde presented earlier. I think the main message here is that for both types of projects, the analysis of the context of inequalities, poverty, and exclusion is very key. To distinguish between +2 and +3, it will mainly be the depth of this analysis. The country diagnostics that are being done through the EU Research Facility are very key tools to understand the dynamic and the driver of inequality within country. This initial analysis also helped to identify who are the main groups that are affected by those inequalities, by poverty, and what are their main constraints, and how the project can really act on these constraints. The second message here is that it's also very important to have clear objective activities that are also reflected in the result framework of the project. So results are also very, very important. It is mainly M&E, the definition of a robust M&E framework, and evaluation as well at the end of the project to really assess what are the key impact of the project. We also develop tools to support our project team. We have inequality checklist. I'll also mention the diagnostic done by the research work. We also promote DIA tools, as one presented by Miguel. And I can present you very quickly an example that we have done recently. So this is a project under preparation in Greater Antananarivo in Madagascar. It's a +3 project, so the main objective of the project is to reduce inequalities and to promote inclusion. It aims to improve living conditions and resilience of vulnerable populations in the poorest neighborhoods of Antananarivo, and to identify the priority neighborhoods of Antananarivo for the project. We use different set of criteria. One set of criteria related to vulnerability to natural hazards, especially flooding and landslides. Exposure to those hazards are very high in Antananarivo. And the second set of criteria used was specifically on social and economic vulnerability. And here we did use a DIA methodology. We use the DI methodology on assets and not income, because in Madagascar, the most recent national survey is on assets. So we did the model and we conducted the surveys. And so the results provided a breakdown of the households by wealth quintile by municipality, as the chart that you can see here. It highlighted strong wealth inequalities across municipalities in Antananarivo, with the poorest household concentrated in some of the municipalities. What was also interesting is that it highlighted stronger vulnerability among women and also young adults. So this was very useful insight for the project. And the study also analyzed the travel time for the bottom 40 compared to other wealth quintile, and also the perception of road degradation during rainy season. So the project here will really improve mobility infrastructure in the most disadvantaged and vulnerable neighborhoods. And this is a very interesting project on inequality and inclusion. So this is my last slide. As an example, before we see that linking climate and social objective is very key. I think on AFD side, we need to continue working on those linkages. We have close to 45% of our climate projects that also target inequalities and inclusion. So we need to increase this number. Just environmental transitions are, of course, a way to do it, but also we need to mainstream inequalities and inclusion within climate projects. Adaptation is an area where continued efforts are also needed to better include disadvantaged population in planning, in implementation. And so the locally led climate adaptation principle that was launched in 2023 is a very useful framework to work on this. And finally, the research to help understand better the links between inequality and climate change is also very, very key in that regard. So from here, thank you very much. You also have access to our annual report, which will present all the data by geography and sector and other example of projects. And we will go a bit south with Javier from Spain.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Well, I would like to start saying that the Spanish Guide for Mainstreaming the Inequality is a side event of this facility. Because 8 years ago, when the Spanish branch of Oxfam addressed to us demanding co-financement for a study about a study that they proposed, we didn't know nothing about this facility, and we bet for this proposal from Oxfam. And after 2 years and a half, we finished the studies satisfactory, and we discovered ANDA and all the team of the European Commission and the French agency, and we have started being involved in the facility and in many other spaces in which we could develop our ignorance about this proposal. Well, I have only 6 slides, don't worry, and will be very, very, very fast. And I will try not overlapping about nothing said before, because as has been mentioned, we have adopted this methodology based exclusively in the experiences of the European Union. We have adopted basically the same methodology, and in the experience of the French agency, and of course also taking advantage of all the knowledge of our community of practices, of DAC community practices of the OECD. The 3 are the sources of our methodology. And we are very, very happy with this methodology, and everybody is happy about the simplicity and the light of our approach. Usually in the Spanish agency, every approach has more than 150 pages, full of templates, full of a lot of information, and with a high quality of intellectual sources. We have decided to do this only with 34 pages. Very simple. We don't decide to do any kind of resume, summarizing, because as was recommended by the technician involved in the draft, nobody will read the long document, and it's better to have only one single and simple document. Well, we start by doing a definition with a study about what we understand by fighting inequality. We did it 3 years ago, after we adopted several criteria for applying this guide and this mainstream approach. And we identified different potential sectors, quite different from the French agency and the European Union, because we don't bet by the bottom 40. We bet by our traditional principal sectors of activity: gender, indigenous population, fiscal matters, fiscal policies, geographical inequalities, and handicap population. Basically, all of these are the focus in which we are involved in our daily work. Well, I could say that we approve a new law of sustainable development cooperation in 2023, in which Article 2 say that fighting poverty and inequality is the pool of our activity. We have a reinforcement from the framework of our legal system, and as was mentioned yesterday by Sergio Colina, the master plan for the next 4 years introduce a new cross-cutting approach. It's the approach against inequality and fighting inequality and poverty. Well, After that, it was very easy to develop this study because we have the political will and all the support from all the bosses, and it was very, 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 very easy. We did a strategy, we assumed several tools, and we did training for our manpower, for our people working inside the agency, in the headquarters, and also in our offices. We have 53 offices abroad, quite a large number of people, and we divide that between three different categories: the technical offices, cultural offices, and training offices. All of them only do ODA cooperation, even the cultural. They are devoted to the cultural cooperation and the development of the cultural industries locally. Well, and finally, we start next Monday the 4th training course for our human resources. And this year also we decide to invest in a pilot project in Cape Verde for developing a rural area in the coast that has been adopted by the government as the pilot project for developing the poorest area of Cape Verde. We hope that it will begin as soon as possible. And in December of the last year, the 10th of December, we officially launched our guide. Some of the people here sitting, Carl and our with us in Madrid, Carlos also. And since then, here, I will pass to the present our guide. It's quite very similar to the Commission methodology. We have 4 criteria with different numbers, but with names, but exactly the same. Of course, the why, to know and to understand the context of the inequality. The second one is that we call who, is identify and involve the population more vulnerable. The third one, identify and support the strategy that can work, that can improve and transform this population. And the fourth one, support and monitoring, promoting the dialogue between the most vulnerable population and the privileged population. It's very, very easy. And we have developed 7 tools that are more or less are the same tools, but I would like to underline one of these tools is the marker, the e-marker, because we have made a mix between the French methodology and the European Union and the Commission methodology. We think that is the perfect solution, of course. Why? Because the three levels of the European Commission, we understand that the bulk of our activities were in the middle. The bulk, I mean 95%, a lot. And we need to difference, to know the nuance between this gross amount of project that we have. And for that, the French choice, we think that to divide between target but not significant and target but significant is quite important. I have this one, sorry, the template, and this is one example that we choose this last year, one specific project that we choose for applying this Excel template. It's very easy to fill in the template because we don't need to put figures. We only tick every window between the 4 criteria and the 4 choices for defining which is the importance that we give to this activity. And for doing that, if you see, it's impossible to fill in. No, we have, sorry, we have a large examples of questions that you should answer before to tick every room, every space, every window. And well, you have at the end of my presentation the link to the guide, but I would like to finish about the future and the positive things that we are doing and we are planning to do. First of all, we have a choice we have choice a focal point in every office. Up to date, we have 22 technicians that are the focal points in Equatorial Guinea, Cape Verde, Philippine Islands, Morocco, in the bulk of our priority countries. After we are continues doing the training of our staff, as I mentioned before, next Monday we will begin the 4th training course for our staff, and the last year it was followed by 60 people. For us it's quite incredible. It's a large number of civil servants involved in receiving this training. And also we have, also inspired by this facility, a special public call for NGOs, university and research centers called Innovation and Action Plans. And every year we devote at least one proposal for inequality research. Last year we adopted one from Médicos del Mundo, Médecins du Monde, Doctor of the World, and our National Council of Research for identifying specific indicators in the health sector that define properly inequalities. And this year we hope to choose another one. We finished in these days the time for closing the call, and I suppose that before the end of the year we will choose another one. And well, we are testing this methodology in Cape Verde, in the project called Integral Development of Puerto Mosquito. And well, the idea is to expand this methodology to the rest of the actors of the Spanish cooperation. And that, as you know, we are a decentralized, very decentralized cooperation with regions, municipalities, and a lot of social actors. And the idea and the feelings that they are, a lot of them, interested in adopting this methodology, adopting and adapting to their needs. Well. That's my presentation. I hope that you have a better knowledge about what we are doing. Thank you very much. And Laure, I pass the floor to you again.
Thank you, Javier. So it's now time to open the floor for questions, remarks, observation. I hope that this has been inspiring for you. As you could see, we tried to present models and tools, but we are quite flexible. You can do like Javier and pick a little bit of what you what would fit you in each of them. So please don't hesitate to intervene.
I'm just the voice of the online chat, so. But I do want to take the opportunity of having the mic to congratulate all of you, because, I mean, having started all of this work together with all of you back in 2017, it's quite inspiring to see how far we've got. So thank you. Now, from the online, we have Tim Conway from the FCDO, who has a couple of questions which we think are all excellent questions, but they're rather directed to Miguel. The machine learning modeling feels like it's similar to approaches like the Progress Out of Poverty Index or similar quick tools like QPS or PATS, which USAID used to use. If an agency wanted to do distributional analysis of ODA-supported programs but actually lacked the resources to develop such a system, they could use the tools like PPI that might already be available. So that's one question. And the second one is, he says that I can see that it is easier to access the inequality impact in some programs, service delivery, for instance, with direct impact on beneficiaries. But is it possible to talk to this variation in availability? How do we evaluate them using the inequality diagnostics across the portfolio? And this is a question that we also had at AFD. And in the next phase of the facility, we actually want to look at how do we assess this impact for projects that do not have identifiable end beneficiaries. So I don't know if you want to take other questions.
So first. So the first issue? 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 So the first issue?
Thank you so much, Eva Maria from BMZ. So we are, of course, also very curious how to operationalize something like this. But what I thought was quite interesting that, if I understood correctly, only AFD actually also used the IMARC approach to set a policy target. So to use it as a kind of strategic instrument to say 50% of our projects need to have these strategic objectives. And so I'm just wondering what the discussions do look like within the Commission or also in Spain regarding using the analytical tool also to actually set political targets. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rachel from Oxford. A quick question for Mathilde. So I was thinking a bit about the challenges of big infrastructure projects. And in my own research, I've come across this extensively. Sort of big roads from natural resource sites to ports are very difficult to create value for the communities that the roads pass by. So I guess two questions for the 360 approach is one, under the governance section, is because these sort of natural resource exports can be useful for tax, right, as tax sources for the government. So is tax policy and enforcing tax capabilities in the government a big part of that governance aspect? And then secondly, I think a big way to transform road infrastructure, at least, to be a little bit more useful for rural communities is adding on to major road projects, smaller rural road connections, building marketplaces, sort of between rural communities and sort of bigger cities, so that rural communities have market options, etc. These kind of smaller infrastructure add-ons to big projects to make them more equitable, and that goes to like again to when the project is developed, adding that as a component. Is that sort of something you're thinking of?
Well, I'll take. I think we're going to answer these three, and then we will continue. We still have about 15 minutes, so don't worry. Does it work? Yes. Mathilde, you had a question on the 360-degree, and maybe you want to take the question also from BMZ on the policy targets, to which Javier could also contribute. And then, Miguel, you had specific questions about the DIA. I don't know, Mathilde, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you so much for all the great questions. So I will start about the last one, about the infrastructure project. It's a very interesting one, and you are completely right about the importance of having tax governance, fair fiscal system. And indeed, it's something that we look at. We have also a dedicated project looking at that. We also now know that it cannot be a fair, inclusive society without tackling this issue. So that is indeed part of it. It's also part of the 360-degree approach to consider that. And we have also specific tools dealing also with this issue, such as budget support and soon also some policy loan that we are also considering. Your point about adding small infrastructure project to big infrastructure project, it's a very good one, because it's exactly what at the headquarters we are trying to do when implementing the inequality marker. Because when I receive a project on my table, I look at how it is, how the EU delegation thought about it, but then I'm trying, to push for reducing inequality, for ensuring that the most vulnerable are part of it. So something that I'm really trying to suggest each time is to add this project. And indeed, after that, we have conversation with EU delegation, with partners, and we are trying to see what could be possible. And we do not score a project as an I1 or an I2 if we do not see that the most vulnerable will have a direct positive impact. If it is only an indirect, perhaps maybe in the long term, then for us it is an I0. It means that inequality at this moment of time will not be reduced. Regarding your question about the inequality marker, how is it structured exactly and the link with others? So indeed, you are completely right. The I marker is a flexible tool. We need to be humble vis-à-vis of the inequality marker. It's a tool under construction, and we are very pleased to see that other member states are also adopting it, also modify it to trying to come with other approaches. But in each time, what we're also doing is also to create a system of equivalence. So, for example, AFD has done it, but also AECID. We are also in discussion to know and to report on how the inequality, how they can express their scores against the I marker, because as Javier was saying, they are very similar. You have, for example, so four levels, but if they want to report against the inequality marker, then the level 2 and 3 will be an I1. So there is an equivalent system already. And that, yes, is a necessity for us to speak the same language.
Sorry. Yeah. Yes, related to the e-marker, I would like to share with you that we have introduced this year in all the forms for financing NGOs, national research centers and universities. And I have received last week the result, the outcome of all the scores. And what surprised to me is that all of them are overestimated. They decide that they are in nearly the main target of all the intervention. It's not true. I have tested 20-something, and it's overestimated, all of them without exception, even coming from very specialized NGOs. And that's why we need a lot of training in order to understand and to read carefully all the questions that we propose in our table. I think that, but in fact, it's the same, exactly the same, only that we split off the middle of the European Commission for the reason I mentioned before, because it was too big for analyzing the one with the 20% till the 95%. No?
No, Céline wanted to just add something, right?
Yes, thank you. On the question from the BMZ, also it was not addressed to me. Setting a target was not an easy process. It's quite long. We worked on it during 2 years. We started reviewing our current portfolio and how it addresses inequality, how it targets the bottom 40. So we started to get some data on our portfolio. We also discussed with sectoral teams. So we now have this overall target for the AFD portfolio, which is also included in each of the sectors. So each of the sectors of AFD has its own target, which is tailored to the type of sectors and the baseline. We also provide some trainings for 2 years as well. So it's very, I mean, we need to take time to set up those targets so that they are really included in the work of the project teams.
Miguel?
Right. So, well, thank you very much, our online colleague, I think was Tim, for the question. The DIA Plus tool is based on previous work that some colleagues and I have been doing in previous years to precisely find better ways to estimate the income and consumption distributions, to assess not just income but also poverty. No? And we have gone through a lot of previous methodologies. There are many interesting approaches. No? The World Bank has some work on that, the Inter-American Development Bank, but also academic colleagues have done a lot of work on that. So we tested different approaches, and we resorted to machine learning because those techniques now offer avenues to be more precise in the estimates. No, we couldn't do this even 5 years ago. We didn't have the computer power. No? So our computers stay a week running the models just to obtain the distributions of Paraguay. No? But we couldn't have done this actually 5 years ago. No? So there are a lot of kind of proposals in the past, and I think we have gone to one of the methodologies that offer probably the more accurate precision relative to previous approaches. It doesn't mean that it's the best, but we are just exploiting what we have now, no? And but we have conducted a review, and we did a lot of tests, and I think we chose the more the optimal methodology. No? So this is in relation to the machine learning approach, which is a random forest, and the description of the methodology is in the study that is going to be published, and I'm happy to go in detail and more the technical aspects of that. No? The other question, Anda's question, was also very important, how we implement the DIA Plus when we have projects that do not focus specifically on populations, no? Infrastructure projects that may benefit, different sectors of the population. And one of the things that we have done is that we developed the tool in a way that is able to connect with, for example, additional data sources like satellite information. No? So if you have an infrastructure project that focuses on roads, we can actually connect, and this is what we did recently with AFD. So we connected satellite data with the questionnaires to see how the distribution looked from the sky. And you can connect actually not only households, but also firms distribution. If you have a continuous distribution, let's say profits or number of employed people or any other distribution that you may be interested, you can use this information together with other complementary data sources to get a more nuance about how infrastructure projects may impact different populations. Can be households, can be firms, can be regions. And then you can combine, for example, in forestry projects, how reforestation is actually taking place. It's very difficult to survey reforestation projects because it's very costly. But you can do it from the sky. And you can use pixels to see the extent to which the forests are being reforested over time by combining these kind of data sources. No? But it's just one example. But I think there are ways. There are certain projects that may not be able to be assessed properly. And there are cases like that. No? Then you need tax incidence analysis and other type of techniques. No? But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. I think we had more questions from the floor. Okay, we have many questions. So please be brief in your questions and your answers, because normally we only have 5 minutes left. Maybe we can do a little bit more, and I will conclude very fast. But go ahead.
All right. Thank you, and congratulations for the work done so far. My name is Henry Gurajena. I'm from the University of the Free State in South Africa. So as part of the Global Gateway and the 360 approach, you mentioned something about acting in the fragile states and that the model cannot be implemented in the same way in different contexts. So I was just wondering more about the results you have been getting in terms of the outcomes and the impacts when working via civil societies on the ground. So has that been working effectively? That's my question. Thank you.
My name is Rose. In order to cope with the competing needs and the scarce financing for development, how can you? What are you doing to tackle all that?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, hello. My name is Mathieu Laurent. I'm working at Enable, the Belgian Development Agency, to support the development of Team Europe initiative on social protection, where we align a lot with the 360 approach. My question is similar to the question in my back about infrastructure development.
Doesn't work.
Okay. Okay. Sorry? Yeah? Okay. Of my hand. Okay, okay, sorry, that was my hand. Yes, so similar to the question on the infrastructure development and the impact, one of the core objectives we have with this Team Europe initiative is to demonstrate the multiplier effect that social protection can have for resilient and sustainable development. I would like to know to what extent practically inequality marker and the IA can contribute to this objective to demonstrate multiplier effect of this approach or another approach. Thank you.
I think at this point we'll take all the questions and then we'll answer.
Thank you. My name is Laura Soriano. I'm the Gender and Inequalities Coordinator for the program Inclusive Society for Latin America and Caribbean, and I have a question to Javier. I would like to know if there is any specific connection or coordination between the gender strategy for AECID and in the inequalities strategy. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Armand Riou de l'Argenté. I'm a retiree from AFD, and my question therefore goes to my colleague, or my comrade, Céline, which is, what is the usefulness of your AFD strategy for national policies for government decision makers?
Hi, Edson Severnini, Boston College. My question, I think, is for Miguel, but it could be anybody on the panel, on the time horizon of the DIA Plus methodology, because it could be the case that in the short run you have a reduction in inequalities, whatever margin you're looking at, and then there is a reallocation, resorting of people that creates an inequality down the line. So think about like sanitation. You bring sanitation to a neighborhood, and that neighborhood becomes more attractive. And then later on, people buy properties or rent there that are more higher income. So in the short run, you're benefiting that particular community. But in a decade or so, it might revert. And so is the methodology capable of taking those nuances, or can you look at different time horizons and tell us what is the impact on inequality?
Thank you. I'm Fabian from National Planning Department of Colombia. My question is very related to Edson's question. Given, I'm wondering about how your reflections about how these instruments could include the persistence of impacts of development interventions and inequality. For example, the example by Javier on vaccination in the Guajira in Colombia. One can think that the effects could last, but for example, in some income improvement interventions, we have seen in Colombia that after the end of the intervention of the project, the inequality reductions just vanish, for example, in the Cauca region in Colombia. Thank you.
Last question, please, and then I will ask you to answer very briefly. Maybe try to address only the question that was directed to you, and then, at the risk of being a little bit superficial, anyways, afterwards there will be a lunch, so you can get deeper into the topic in a more informal way. Please, last question.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Leo from Paris School of Economics. I have a questions maybe for Mathilde as well as Miguel, relatedly. So inequality is not only about poverty reduction, and so far you've been insisting a lot on the impact for the bottom 40% of the distribution. And so I'm wondering to what extent the Global Gateway will work with firms that are operating in the destination country. And to that extent, it's like a lot of funds will be received by these funds, and so it will also affect inequality by raising the revenues of people implementing the programs, right? So if you want to assess the overall impact on the inequalities, you would also have to factor that into your indices.
Javier, do you want to start? We're going to go like...
Okay, well.
Take the mic, maybe. Yes.
Very much. Yeah. Laura, the coordination is quite perfect. We are colleagues, and my Deputy Director General, she is one specialist of gender, Miriam Ciscar. I don't know if you know her. And she has been involved in this proposal since 3 years ago. And we realized that this is a nuance, the fight against inequality of the gender approach. It's not the same, but because gender approach means 50% of the population, but not all of them are vulnerable population. And they will begin to use our methodology for also their approach, gender or child or discapacity, well, for all the specialists. I am in a brand new directorate that is full of specialists of sectorial specialists, and this is a cross-cutting approach. That means that it will be everyone could take benefit of our methodology. And related to the colleague, well, SDGs are the guidelines of the Spanish cooperation, and all the principles are related with our approach. Usually, in the guide, we mention 20-something times SDG 10, and of course is adopted by the last two governments of different parties. And I think that we have a perfect correspondence between the SDGs and our approach. And finally, the question made by the colleague in
quickly,
this...
Javier, quickly, because we are running out of time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well,
no, go
only
ahead.
saying that I don't know, because we choose that proposal because we have the form, and we took this form as a specimen for doing for training and for doing and filling in the approach. But in fact, I don't know which is if we reduce the inequalities with this vaccine project or we didn't have a specific effect.
Thank you. To the question, to the usefulness of our strategy for decision makers, you mean decision makers in our partners' country, right? Okay, very good. So, I mean, the use is really to prioritize our funds, our technical assistance to those critical topics of inequality, social inclusion, and social cohesion. So it's also a way to put the important topic on the table with our partners. And also it is used as guidelines for our dialogue with decision makers in countries. And for example, the example in Madagascar, our methodology was really used by the Ministry of Planning to prioritize the municipalities of intervention of the project. So they really wanted to focus on economic and social vulnerability in municipalities that are most affected by those by this. So yes, I mean that's my response to it.
Thank you. Very briefly. So about the spillovers, so I think this is an important question. So there are a few ways you can do it. So one is, what are the priors you have from the theoretical, ideas that you have? You have your theory change that you expect some spillovers. So you can link the theory change to the way you design the sampling frame and also the questionnaires that guide the applause. So if you think that an infrastructure project, roads, will have spillovers effects on, for example, jobs or access to health or schools, then you link those predictions or priors with the questionnaire and the sampling frame, and then you are allowed to collect information that allows you to answer those questions about spillovers. So, and I can give you some ideas or examples. In terms of the intertemporality and the dynamic aspect of inequality, so you're totally right. So the idea conceptually is designed to be implemented ex ante and ex post. So you have a time frame that covers the life cycle of the projects. But you can potentially collect information after the project has ended to see after 5 years how this population actually start to, to evolve. So you can, in principle, do it. No? So you have the data that was collected prior, during the implementation and at the end of the cycle, and then you can actually, there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it. And that connects to the second question, which is about the bottom 40. I agree, so the bottom 40 has a lot of limitations, and it's really problematic. So we have developed some new methods, the Inequality lines we call it. So these are benchmark incomes that capture the entire income distribution and more precisely identify populations below which any transfer, like following some principles in inequality analysis, that any transfer will be inequality reducing. So the bottom 40 is discretionary, and I agree with that. We follow the SDG principles because it's bottom 40, but there are other ways to address these questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And very quickly, so about the fragile context, so indeed there it is very difficult to apply the global gateway. So we work with civil societies in order to ensure the impact in the long term. We have developed the CSO world maps to ensure that regularly we have contact with CSOs in order to make sure that our project can make impact. That regarding the scarce resources, indeed we are facing a financing gap. So for that we are developing innovative financing, such as blending in order to leverage private or public investments. So we put a small amount of money, technical assistance, grants, in order then to leverage additional amount. And then we also de-risk through the guarantees. That could be another instrument that we use in addition to the traditional ODA grants. And that makes also the link with your question about the small and medium enterprises. You're completely right. The methodology does not only focus on the bottom 40%, we also focus on other socio-economic disadvantaged groups, but not only, also small and medium enterprises, and especially through the guarantees and blending operation. And finally, regarding the question on social protection multiplier, indeed, the iMarker methodology could be of great benefit through conducting inequality diagnosis, but also the DNA. DIA. And then we are also conducting a new phase of the facility, so there we can also see how to make sure social protection could be a multiplier.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I will be very brief. I won't stand between you and lunch. I think this has been a very interesting session because it has become quite technical, but it's because it's so important to equip ourselves with the right tools to make sure we deliver on our ambitions. And ultimately, this is about shared political commitment, because, and here I'm going to make my own statement made by colleagues from the presidency of South Africa yesterday. We are at a crossroads. Development cooperation is at a crossroads. And if we want, it's not about doing more. If we want to address inequality, it's about doing things differently. So this is what this conference is about, exchanging and finding pathways to do things better all together. So thank you so much for listening, both here and online. And now time for lunch.